I'm Nate Harris. Grew up in the Dallas area, the quote unquote perfect family. Went to church every Sunday. My parents are married after 50 plus years. Uh, the Leave It to Beaver type family. Moved out here about 8 or 9 years ago. Been going to Shannon Oaks for 5 or 6 years on and off. I got married at 27 and I stayed married for 11 years. Just like any couple, we had our ups and downs, and but then things started getting harder. It was tough. We had a lot of support from friends and family, but it was tough. And the marriage dissolved, and I went from a household, you know, full of kids and a wife to nobody, and my wife and kids that moved out of state. As the divorce started, I didn't see my kids for nearly 6 months. Talk to them, see them, and only after the court ordered visitation did I start to see them. When I had to call my parents, I talked to my mom initially, and having to tell her I was getting a divorce was one of the hardest things I've ever done. The shame associated with that. When I was raised up in a family where divorce was unacceptable, and you did what you had to do to make the marriage work. That was really hard, having to tell my parents that. One of the hardest things I've ever had to hear was at the very first court date. My lawyer, he met me on the front steps, and he told me, and my parents were standing beside me, he said, "I'm going to drop an atomic bomb on you." He said there's been some pretty horrible accusations made against me about my kids. And he told me you could end up in prison. That's a hard pill to swallow. I ran the full gamut of emotions there. Scared, angry, fearful, disbelief. I can't put into words the emotions I felt at that moment. There's no word to describe it. Initially, I had to have supervised visits for my kids, and that was one of the most humiliating things I've ever been through. Knowing that I'm a father that loves my children so much, and having to be supervised by another adult that I don't know was humiliating. It was, it hurt. It was one of the worst experiences I've ever been through. I had to deal with lots of rumors around town, even at church. I'd be walking along, see some people standing there talking, and I would automatically assume that they were talking about me and talking about how bad I was. I would come to church and I would see people talking. And it took me a little while to realize that I probably wasn't the topic of their conversation. There was one point I was angry at the whole world. I was angry at God, first and foremost. I was angry at the situation for what happened, and I was angry at my ex-wife. And I fought it for a long time. But I can remember a day, and I don't know the specific date, but I can remember a time where I had enough, and I had a long talk with God and said, I can't do this by myself anymore. And I gave it over to Him, and that doesn't mean it's always been easy. But from that point on, there was no doubt who was in control. My heart knew that God was in control, and I had a peace about me that I had never felt before in my life. Now, as it's progressed, I I see them, pretty much every other weekend. The drop-off and the pickups are not very much fun. When I pick them up on the beginning of the weekend, that's the happiest day of my life. But when I drop them off Sunday, it's the hardest day of my life. It's been the hardest thing I've ever done. God must think I'm really strong. I've learned that there are people out there who are not biological family members who can love you just like a family member, and who have done more than I could ever imagine. I've learned that there's some really great people out there. I realize that God has done a whole lot for me. And it's my job as a Christian to share that story with others. And if the story that I have could help one person who's going through struggles and trials, well, then it's all been worth it.